Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar. As you've heard me say week after week, the Rebbe's dream was to bring about the revelation of Mashiach, a time where there'll be no more pandemics, no more war, no more suffering, no more sickness, a time when godliness will be absolutely revealed in the world, Ein Od Milvado. Godliness will be viral throughout the world. In order to achieve this, Shluchim were sent throughout the entire world. In 1996, Rabbi Yitzi and his Rebbetzin Rochel Loewenthal went to Denmark. Now, Denmark has an interesting history. We all know that in the Second World War, during the Holocaust, the Danes saved their Jewish community. But it seems of recent anti-Semitism is on a high. Because of liberalism, they banned Shechita, ritual slaughtering, and now bris, circumcision, is under inspection. So to tell us more about the dynamics there, and also to share with us some insights, because that's what this is all about, of how we can better our lives and bring about Mashiach, we have the Shliach from Denmark, Rabbi Yitzi. So Rabbi Yitzi, thank you for doing this, and we look forward to hearing you.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be with so many. And so we're sitting here in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's dark and cold. I know by you guys it's already hitting the summer. But so let's start. When I was a kid, I remember at our Seder table, there are different parts of the Seder and there are different stories, and I'm sure every family has different traditions, what happens at different parts of the Seder. And when we would get to the part that was Shvoch Chamatcha al Hagoyim, which is probably one of the parts which is not so great to translate, it's pour your wrath against the nations that are doing bad. My grandmother always used to say, my grandmother, was born in 1911, and she'd lived through the First World War and the Second World War and so forth. She always used to say, but not the Danes, because of what the Danes had done during the Second World War, and because of the way they had saved the Jews. And the truth be told is that was just a childhood memory. My grandmother passed away when I was 18. But then when we moved here, and the first time we had Seder here, I suddenly remembered that story. And just to give you a little bit of a set of context is I'm sitting over here in the Chabad house, which the Chabad house is next door a shul. The shul, a little shul, has been here since, called Machzik Adas, has been here since 1933, functioning as a shul every single day, whereas this building, which is the building next door, number 10, number 12, during the Second World War, actually functioned as a Nazi headquarters. So you have the Nazis here, right where I'm sitting. You have the Jews next door. Now, Baruch Hashem, the Jews are in both places, and please God, in half an hour we'll be davening Ma'ariv there, as we davened Shachos there this morning, and so forth. So Denmark has a very interesting history vis-a-vis its Jews. And I know Rabbi Masenza mentioned about current day anti-Semitism. The interesting thing is, it's actually not really anti-Semitism, but it does create great challenges for us as Jews living here. When we first moved here, as mentioned 24 years ago, we rented an apartment from a man who'd lived in a family that had lived in that apartment for the past 80 years. And I remember once standing at the door, ringing, with the key, putting in the key, and an elderly man approached me and he grasped my hand and he said, "Are you from the family Samson?" Because that was the family that used to live there. And I said, "No." He said, "Because I was here as a child during the war, and I remember that they escaped, and I remember that we took care of their apartment during the war, but I left this part of the country. I moved to another part of the country, and I never discovered if they actually came back." And I said, "Don't worry, yes, they came back." And the person that passed away a couple of years earlier, but they lived there many years for many years. Now I'm going to share a screen here with a little PowerPoint, and let's take a look. We can get this going. Hold on. So 1 sec. Yeah. Okay. So we have over here, right? This is I'm born in England. And of course, that's my family. And the picture at the bottom is my grandson, who lives in Lithuania. And they're the shluchim there. But what we have over here is a picture of a coin. And this is a coin made in the 16th century by the king. And if you notice carefully, it has a Yud K, Vav K, which is Hashem's name in Hebrew. And that is because this king, King Christian IV, liked the Jews. And therefore, he invited the Jews to Denmark in order to help him. It was actually to help him finance his various wars. And so in that sense, the Jews in Denmark, unlike the rest of Europe, where they came as refugees, in Denmark, they came as guests. And in many ways, this coin sort of symbolizes that attitude that they had towards the Jews. And in fact, there are a couple of places here in Copenhagen. One of this is a round tower. It's in the middle of Copenhagen. Most people do not notice it, but the third line down of this text is actually Hashem's name in Hebrew. And that is again built by the same King Christian IV in 1642. And he put that up also because of his connection or appreciation of the Jewish people. And because of that, you don't have a very large Jewish community in Denmark throughout from the 16th, 17, 1800. But if you go in the 1800s, this is a map of Denmark. And you have over here, there are Jewish cemeteries, which are a good indication of a permanent Jewish community that are there are actually 10 cemeteries all around Denmark, which I put them as red dots, which they are the different places where Jewish communities lived. For those that are following the current news, the story about the mink farms, they're all up in the north, in Aalborg, which is relatively far away from Copenhagen, but they're up in Aalborg. There was a community actually the last shul that existed around Denmark, and it was actually destroyed during the Second World War. It burned down. But otherwise, there's very little left, but there are cemeteries in all of these places. So now we fast forward to the Second World War. In the Second World War, Denmark is occupied. I'm not going to go through all of the history because it's, of course, a long story. But Denmark is occupied in 1940 by the Nazis. And for the first 3 years of the occupation, the agreement, or so to speak, the agreement is that there's going to be not a typical occupation, but a cooperation between the Nazis and the Danish government. And the Danish government is functioning. And as I mentioned here, there was a shul. There is a shul, and the shul was functioning 1940, 41, 42, 43. I heard recently, about a year ago, we had a guest who told us he was bar mitzvah in 1942 in the shul with the Nazis next door. And that was because there was this sort of soft agreement that nothing would happen to the Nazis, would not overtake the sovereignty of Denmark. In 1943, that agreement broke down, and basically the resistance against the Nazis started to get stronger and stronger, and there was attacks against Nazis. There were factories were blown up, and because of that, at a certain point, the Nazis says, we are going to be punishing the saboteurs and the resistance people not in Danish prisons, but in German prisons, which means they would get the death penalty. Because of that, they said, therefore, the government said, we are resigning. Martial law was declared, and at that point, this is in September or August of 1943, Eichmann says, we therefore need to round up the Jews of Denmark. The 1st of October was Rosh Hashanah that year. They sent a boat with space for 5,000 people, and it was moored on the quay, not far away from here, 2-3 kilometers away from here. They sent a platoon of SS soldiers, 500 of them, to travel around, to go around Copenhagen and round up the Jews. The fact that this was going to happen was leaked to the Jewish people. And basically the word was given around, tonight is Rosh Hashanah, do not come to shul, do not be at home. Ask a friend, ask somebody you know if you can hide in their homes. And Jews turned to their neighbors, to their colleagues, to their children's classmates, all sorts of people. And I'm not going to say the vast majority, but many of them responded, yes, you can come hide with us. And basically, I have not yet heard of any Jew that did not have a place to hide. Any Jew that was ready, willing, and able to hide, They were able to hide that night, and then they were hidden for the next 1-2 weeks until boats, these are a picture of boats were ready to take them and transport them over the Sound, over the, I'm going to show you we'll go back to that little map. And if you see on that little map, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's Copenhagen just across the water. It's actually it's not shown on the picture, is Sweden. And that space that runs over there between Denmark and Sweden, the King of Sweden had announced that any Jews or any Scandinavians or any Danes that come to Sweden are going to be welcomed in. And in the thick of night, here you see a boat. This is a true picture of a boat traveling. It was rowboats. There were fishing boats. All sorts of boats were used, and they took the Jews over to Sweden during the period of from Rosh Hashanah 1943, basically for the next month. Right over here, this is a picture of a church up in Gilalai, which is a city in the north, where every single night about 100 or so Jews would hide, and then in the morning there was, or in the middle of the night, there were boats that were ready to take them and bring them over the water. Unfortunately, after doing this about 6 or 7 nights, the Nazis heard about it, and they surrounded this church, and they captured everybody, and they took everybody to Theresienstadt. And over here, this is a picture of myself together with a man called Jörn Kieler. Jörn Kieler was a man who, as he described it to me and is described in the book that he wrote, he said, we needed 5 things. He was a medical student, and he was aware. He'd been in Munich when Mussolini and Hitler had been there, and he'd seen the site, and he said, the Nazis are going to come to Denmark. They're going to do deportations. We have to be ready. And he had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and they together prepared a resistance plan. They were not the only ones, but they were one of many that prepared a resistance plan. Part of it consisted of his sister, together with her then boyfriend, going to all the homes north of Copenhagen, large homes, knocking on the door and saying, listen, we're raising money to save the Jews. We're raising 500,000 krona. 500,000 krona in today's money is $100,000, but at that time it's probably more of equivalent to $5 million. And they raised 100,000 krona. They raised this large amount of money, with every family giving large amounts. He then said, he told me we needed 5 things. We needed guns, a place to hide the Jews, boats, money, and Jews. And the way he described it is the guns, there was a policeman that had a collection of guns that had been confiscated. Money, they got it, as I mentioned. A place to hide the Jews. They found a bathhouse, a large bathhouse that was willing to hide the Jews. Boats, somebody came with 10 boats and 10 fishermen. He said the only thing we were missing was Jews. And the way he described it to me is his sister went, looked for people with slightly long noses. That was the way and she found 2 of them. They brought their friends. He managed to save over 1,000 Jews. And if you see in this picture on the right, we gave him a parchment written by a sefer in Israel, written with a Danish inscription, Mitzadike Umasa Elam. And I think actually that was a correct thing, because, you know, Chasidei Umasa Elam is actually those people that keep the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. But Tzadike, he really put his life on the line, him and his sisters. He was sentenced to death by the Nazis. He was sentenced to death. He was shot at. He was hit. He was wounded. He was sentenced to death. But he managed to survive, and he survived the war. And we brought him to the Chabad house a few years ago. He's since passed away a couple of years ago at the age of 96. We brought him to the Chabad house, and I was thinking, what sort of gift can you give a fellow who saved 1,000 Jews? And I'd given him already, when I went to visit him, I gave him a bottle of wine that was 40 years old that somebody had given me for my 40th birthday. It was not kosher, but I thought this is the perfect fellow to give it to. But we brought him, and I said, what sort of gift? And the best gift, I think, is the gift of meaning. And when somebody stood up, we were a room of about 100 people, almost all of them descended from people that had been saved. And somebody got up and said, Mr. Keela, I want you to look around this room and know that every single person in this room, or almost every single person in this room, is alive because of you and people like you. And I think he was very moved by that, and we presented him with this parchment thing. And actually, in the Danish Resistance Museum, he's one of the prominent people of the story of the rescue, because he was very much a part of the rescue. Now, so the numbers, there were 7,500 Jews in Denmark at that time. 7,000 of them were taken over to Sweden. They remained there for 18 months until the end of the war. The other 500 were arrested. And the remarkable story, perhaps you could say an even more remarkable story, of the 500, they were taken to Theresienstadt. However, the Danes said, listen, if anything happens to these 500 people, the entire Denmark will be in an uproar. Any production, there were boat yards, there was production of bacon, there was various productions that were going on, they said, is going to be destroyed if anything happens to these 500 people. Of the 500, none of them were sent to Theresienstadt. They were sent to Theresienstadt. None of them were sent on to Auschwitz, which was where everybody else from Theresienstadt was sent. And of the 500, 450 of them survived and returned. 51 lost their lives in Theresienstadt, and about 30 lost their lives crossing over into Sweden. But in general, out of 7,500, less than 100 people lost their lives. Truly a remarkable story of the rescue of the Danes. Now, I have to be honest, which is that being here for many years, I always said to myself, how would the Danes react today? Do they have that same perspective when it comes to the Jewish people? And on this is a picture of the big synagogue in Copenhagen, which is a few minutes away from here. This is a picture of the Chabad house, which is where we're in right now. And next door is the little synagogue of Machzikei Hadass, which is what I mentioned. Now, as I mentioned to you, here I'm, right, we're going to now run forward. As I mentioned to you, one second, let me just, right, we'll come back to that in a minute. As I mentioned to you, I always said to myself, would the Danes react in the same way? And unfortunately, 5 years ago, we had a terrorist attack here. It was not right here in the Chabad house. It was at the main synagogue. I was at a bat mitzvah. And at that time, there was an attack on a free speech gathering. And then later on, there was the terrorist was on the loose, and he came to the shul, which behind the shul, there's a community center. And there was a bat mitzvah of a good friend of ours. I was at the bat mitzvah celebration, and then at a certain point I left. It was actually during the Kinus HaShluchos, so my kids were home with a babysitter, and as leaving, I said to the guard, maybe don't stand outside. It's a little dangerous. There's a terrorist on the loose. And he said, no. This is a damn big fellow. He said, no, we want to be proactive and want to watch the cars. And he actually accompanied me to my car. And then about 30 minutes later, the terrorist showed up pretending to be drunk, and shot him point blank, and he was killed. And that was, of course, a great tragedy for us. It was also a great tragedy and a shock, both because Dan was a good friend, but also because this terrorist continued to be loose in Copenhagen. We had to put the Chabad house in lockdown. I had the police coming here with a helicopter sitting on top to secure us. But what we saw after that, so a few hours later, they caught the terrorist and he was killed. And they found out he was working on his own. But what we saw after that was a tremendous outpouring of affection, which is where hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people from the prime minister down came and put flowers at the place where he had been shot. And so within a few days, you had literally the entire street. They blocked off the entire street. The entire street was filled with flowers as a sign of affection. And me, very visibly Jewish, people know me, walking around, people came over to me, shook my hands, said, oh, we want to offer our sympathy and our condolences. So there was definitely a very strong feeling of affinity. And to that extent, also since then, the government decided that they're going to take security very seriously. And so since then, we have at the Jewish locations, which consist of the school during hours when it's functioning, the shul 24 hours because some people live in the building behind, and here the Chabad house because there are people living up. We live upstairs and other people live upstairs. there are 24-hour, we have 7 soldiers, 1 policeman, and they are guarding us 24 hours. So that is a sense of the concern that the government and the people have decided to shall we say, protect us, and we're very grateful towards that. At the same time, we have the other challenges, which are we're living in Europe and a very secular mindset. I think Denmark and Sweden are from the 2 most secular countries in the world. And the questions that come are, why are we allowing Shechita? Why are we allowing bris milah? So 6 years ago, Shechita was outlawed, and it was done in a sort of roundabout way, because about, I think, 10 or 15 years ago, they said they outlawed any shechting of animals without stunning, with an exception for religious reasons. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, they just took away the exception. And part of the reason, the challenge to that is that at that time, for the last 10, 15, even 20 years, we've not been doing any shechita, probably a strategic mistake on our part. And because we made a calculation, both with the Chabad and the community and the shop made a calculation, it was cheaper just to bring in the stuff from, let's say, France or somewhere else. And because of that, they said, well, we're going to outlaw it because it's not relevant anyway, because it doesn't have any practical impact. Obviously, for us, we realized that this is, the 2 issues, bris milah and shechting, do unfortunately go together, and so therefore shechting is just one step closer to outlawing bris milah. So shechting has been outlawed. At the time we protested and tried different things. It hasn't had any practical relevance because we're in Europe and the gates, the borders are open. We're able to bring in meat freely, but the symbolism of it is obviously important. What has happened now for the last 20 years, but especially the last couple of years, has been a systematic attack against bris milah. And this systematic attack against bris milah has been an argument. Why are people being circumcised? This is primitive. And actually, I remember we had a couple of years ago, we had a conference of urologists here. And here in the Chabad house, we have open Shabbos meals, not during Corona, but usually. And so we had about 15 doctors. The conference was a couple thousand people. Some of them were Jewish, and some of them were Shomer Shabbat. And about 15 or 20 of them were there. And I said, okay, wow, you're really the forum to talk to us, because what's your opinion on Brit Milah? And so there was very strong contrast, the difference between the people coming from Europe versus the people from America and the people from South Africa. Because from Europe, they was saying, we're being pressed. Everyone wants to outlaw it because in Europe, people are not circumcised. So therefore, everyone is saying, why are we doing this crazy thing? Countries with bigger Islamic populations, let's say England and France, might not actually be outlawed because they would have an uproar from the Muslim populations. But people with smaller Muslim populations might do it as an attack on the Muslim populations, with us as the Jews being the victim on the side. In America, they said, what do you mean? Everybody's circumcised. In the South African doctor said, what do you mean? We circumcise everybody because of the danger of AIDS. We're circumcising all the people, the Black people and so forth. And so in that sense, it was very interesting to see how each country really had a different perspective on this. And in Europe, in many ways, they sort of see themselves as being very intellectual and very clever, and therefore our perspective must be right. And therefore they have this strong criticism towards circumcision. So it came up 2 years ago, and it was shot down. It came up again just now recently. It has, thank God, been shot down, with the Prime Minister saying that we have protected our Jews during the Second World War. We plan to protect our Jews again. And it's quite interesting that she's done it in that way, that she's phrased it in that way. She hasn't even phrased it as far as religious freedom, but more as we're protecting our Jews. Which is, different people have different opinions if that's a good way or not. But she is protecting it. One of the side effects of this sort of argument has been, the positive side is that it's meant that for many Jews, they're willing to come up and stand up and say, bris milah is a real and important thing. But the negative side is that young people that have families, especially a Jewish woman married to a non-Jew, And even two Jews married together, they say we're living in a society which views circumcision as being something negative. Maybe I shouldn't circumcise my child. So a few months ago, we had a couple over here, and they were both Jewish, but the man had not been circumcised. He'd grown up in a very secular way, not grown up in any religious society, and he was not circumcised. And they sat down with me, and they were disagreeing with each other, where the woman wanted to circumcise his son and the husband did not. And they said, come, let's have a conversation about it. And so we began having a conversation. And the first thing the husband said, well, this is something that's irreversible. So nowadays there's something called Rabbi Google. I said, well, let's ask Rabbi Google if circumcision is irreversible. Can you, so there I am sitting at my desk, can you reverse the effects of circumcision? And Google, thank God, I guess somebody paid to sponsor such a thing, comes up with a thing, 5 ways to reverse circumcision. With this day, I went, okay, fine. I showed it to him. This is what Google says. Google knows what they're talking about. He says, you know what? Okay, I'm not going to argue with Google. So he agreed. The only thing is, he says, I'm protesting. I'm under protest. I'm not happy about it, but okay, I'll agree that my son will be able to be circumcised. So they come to the we agree. They have the baby, Baruch Hashem, and we bring in a mohel. And the law in Denmark is that in order to do a brit, this is a law that's going back hundreds of years, that in order to do a brit, you have to have a doctor present. So sometimes it's we bring it has to be a Danish doctor present. We don't have a Danish doctor that also a mohel. So actually, I think for this brit, we brought a mohel who was a doctor from France. And there was a doctor and also a doctor that comes along, because that's the rule. You know, that's the way we coordinate a brit. When can the parents, and when can the doctor, and when can the mohel? Fine. So there's this this young man riding towards us to the Brit Milah together with his I think his wife and the child. They took a taxi, and he's riding in a bicycle. And it's in Denmark, Copenhagen. They have these bicycles where you can sit in the front. He's sitting there. Somebody else is sitting in the front. Another family member. As they're riding towards us, suddenly they're riding down a bridge, and suddenly and he flips over, and the whole he falls over, and the person with him falls over. And they both come to the Chabad house with, with little wounds on their head. And as basically slightly in jest, there he was protesting against the Brit Milah. I said, listen, it looks like it's more dangerous to drive through the streets of Copenhagen on a bicycle, which is something that everybody does every single day, than to have a Brit Milah. The doctor, thank God, bandaged them up. We did the Brit Milah. He was, as he said, he made the bracha, but then he left the room because he wanted to be in protest. And in that sense, that was Baruch Hashem successful. And so very often with the circumcisions that we do, there are challenges. Now, so far, I think all I've spoken about is negative things. The Holocaust, circumcision, and Shechita. Obviously, as Shluchim, we are here to spread light, to bring positivity, to bring holiness, to bring goodness. And one of the things, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. Let's see if we can find it. Right. Whoops. It's hold on. We go back to the PowerPoint, and over here, and you can see some of the activities that we do and have done. One of them there is in the Israeli ambassador's home, having a group from Chabad. These are, of course, various children's activities. Others are in the Chabad house, and then others in other parts of Denmark. One of the things that we, Baruch Hashem, have been quite successful is we have a Shabbos meal every week, and it brings about that people meet each other, boys and girls, and we have, Baruch Hashem, had quite a few couples that have met. Sometimes it's people that have lived here all their lives, and other times it could literally be people that are passing through. I remember once receiving a call from someone, said, well, do you remember I was by you for 2 weeks? Well, it happened to be that same 2 weeks, there was another nice guy there. We met, we're getting married next week, and we just wanted to tell you they'd met in the Chabad house. Actually, my first and so far only trip to South Africa was when a nice young woman from Copenhagen, who would come to us for Shabbat very often, met a young man, Darren Stein from Joburg, who was passing through, and they met each other. They met each other on the couch, and as I joked, I said, I think they wanted to bring the couch to come to their wedding, but they couldn't get the couch coming. So instead they asked me to come. So I came along and had a wonderful time celebrating their wedding, both the Shabbos before in Johannesburg, at the Chabad house, my brother-in-law's Chabad house in Norwood, Rabbi Rochel, and in Cape Town where the wedding was. And that was a very beautiful simcha. And Baruch Hashem, I must say that over the years, there have been many couples that have met each other. And we see that as a very central idea of bringing couples together, creating light, creating Jewish homes, creating families. Some of them stay here, many of them don't. Unfortunately, there's not a full Jewish infrastructure here. So a lot of people, and we actually, to be honest, especially when people with their children get older, we encourage them to leave to a bigger community in order that their children should grow up in a stronger Jewish environment. But that is something that we are happy about. And over here, this is the main square of Copenhagen, and this is the Hanukkah menorah. A couple of years ago, on the 7th day of Hanukkah, I get a call from the police, Copenhagen police. They were being very diligent, checking up on the menorah, how it was. And they said, "We think your menorah has been vandalized." I said, "Why do you say that?" They said, "Well, because we're looking at the lights. There are 8 branches, but only 7 of them are alight. It must have been vandalized." I said, "Well, I just got to tell you, it's a little more complicated than that. We light 1 light each night, and we're not yet up to the 8th night, but thank you for looking out for us." As I did mention to you, we have this situation where the police are looking out for us. So sometimes it can lead to some funny situations where they want to know what's going on. So when it's Pesach, they want to know about Pesach, and we give them some Pesach food, and every Shabbos they get challah and soup and hummus and stuff like that. So we always share with them what's going on. And so there's a tradition of Kiddush Levana. For those that are not familiar, Kiddush Levana is a tradition that once a month you go outside, you look up at the moon, and you say a special prayer for the moon. You say it from the 7th of the month. You could have already said it last night if you wanted. So we live over here in a thin street, which means it's not always able to see the moon. So here's a scene. This is we're north, so that means Shabbat goes out nowadays in the winter. It goes out very early, 5 o'clock. It gets to 4:30. In the summer, it goes out very late, 11, 11:15, 11:30. So we have an evening service at 11:30, quarter to 12. We're heading out 10 people, 10, 15 people, whoever came to Meyer, but we're looking for the moon. And the first thing is we don't know where the moon is. So we're like walking around the block. There's lakes at the bottom of the street. So we usually go down to the lakes and we're looking for the moon. So there's the policeman and the soldier. They're standing there, and they're trying to be polite, but they're also curious. And they're like, "What's going on?" So I said, "Listen, we're very grateful. We're grateful for the moon. We're grateful for everything that happens in our lives." And so therefore, we're going to say a special prayer for the moon. And so then I see the next guard comes, and he says to his friend, what's going on here? What do we have here? He says, "I don't know, but something to do with their moon. They're out there looking for it." So with that, those are some of the thoughts and the stories of Jewish life in Denmark. Here I am sitting in the Chabad house. We're going to be having a class in Tanya here in a couple of hours. We had Shechita here, Talmud Torah here this morning with a whole nice group of kids. And some of the activities we have are online. Some of the activities are in person for older people, for younger people, for people with children, little kindergarten over here. And in that sense, hoping and working to bring the light of Yiddishkeit in so many ways also to this corner of the world. So I think with this, we're going to take
just one or two questions. Yeah, one or two questions of it. Number one, how many Jews live in Denmark today?
About 7,000.
7,000. What's the rate of intermarriage and assimilation?
Very high. Probably 80 or 90%.
Wow. And it's relations with Israel?
The relations with Israel considers Denmark a friend. So of Europe, remember, it's in Europe. It's not like it's not the United States, but it's generally positive. There's a very good military and secret service and all that stuff. They cooperate very well together, and the governments also generally cooperate. They're generally considered a friend, and generally they are friendly and positive.
And Rabbi Yitzi, how many children do you have?
I have 10 children,
And the kashrus there, just generally, I mean, the things available.
We're not starving, thank God. No, it's a small. First of all, there is There is a kosher store, but that basically has just basics, which means meat and wine. And then there's no bakery, but there's a new invention called Kosher for You, the internet, which is that there's a shop in Belgium that you can make an order online and they'll send food within 2 days. So we use that every 2 weeks, we get a delivery of that. And then we also bring in delivery. So it works out. And then there's a lot of stuff that we know that we know a kosher, and we found out a kosher, and we've looked into it and so forth. I see we had a question over here. Let me see in the chat.
What steps has Chabad of Denmark taken to combat the bris and Shechita bans?
Well, the Shechita ban for now, we have sort of raised our hands. The bris ban is a very complicated thing, and there's a lot of things that are being done. There's unfortunately, the Danish public has this very thing. They're very positive towards Jews. If you ask 100% of them, how many of them like Jews, 90% of them will say they like Jews. But at the same time, 85% say they think bris milah should be illegal. So it's it's dichotomy. They don't understand that bris milah is important for Jews, because for them, their whole religion consists of nothing. So they don't understand that people take religion seriously. So part of it is communication with the politicians. This last struggle was won through direct communication with the politicians. Actually, the mother of the child whose bas mitzvah was attacked had been invited to the prime minister, her and her family, to hear about terror and so forth about a year ago. And they used that connection that they had with the prime minister. It's a small country, so they got through to it and said, I want to have a conversation. I had a conversation with her and said, this is very important for us. Meaning what terror was not able to accomplish, this law will accomplish by driving us out of the country. And I think that conversation was an important part.
Time is running on us. I'd like to ask you, firstly, I want to thank you for the time you gave. I don't know officially thank you, but I want you to end off with it's Tes Kislev, Yud Kislev, Yud Tes Kislev, Chav Kislev, Chav Hey Kislev. I want you to end off with an inspirational vote for us.
These are all days of light. And a number of years ago, a woman calls me and says, I see some Chabad boys. They're sitting on the main square and studying. Would you like me to invite them to the Chabad house? And I said, yes, of course. And I said, how did you know they were Chabad boys? He said, because they were sitting on the main square of Copenhagen, and they were studying a Hasidic discourse, which means to be able to be there, but at the same time to be a little beyond what's around you. That's something that Hasidus has taught us, and that's something that we have to use as an illumination to teach ourselves to be in the world, of the world, but at the same time, slightly above it. And that's something that the light of Chassidus teaches us. My father actually wrote his PhD on the Mitzvah Rebbe, so this is a day that is very special for him, the 9th and 10th of Kislev. But at the same time, it's a day that is special for each and every one of us. The teachings of Chassidus illuminate our lives and lift us up. And let's hope that we're able to do that.
Somebody asked me, WhatsApp me, how many people go in Aliyah? What's the percentage?
It's quite a high percentage. I'm not going to say, but I know when we travel to Israel, we make an event of people. We have 60, 70 people that have made Aliyah. We haven't done it for a few years, but I remember we had 60, 70 people that have made Aliyah over the last few years. So there's quite a lot of people that make Aliyah, especially these families. We often encourage them to make Aliyah. So there's quite a large Danish Jewish community in Israel in different places, including in Ranana. They actually jokingly call it Danana because of so many Danes there. But I know there are many South Africans also there.
Rabbi Loewenthal, thank you for your time. Aaron, over to you, but very inspirational, and you should have Hatzlacha Rabbi Loewenthal.
Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody listening and joining. A lot of Hatzlacha and good things.
Okay, tomorrow is Rabbi Dubov and Kabbalah, and on Thursday we have next Sunday we have a virtual audience with the Rebbe, with the Rebbe's oil. So, but we'll post it out. Rabbi Loewenthal, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Great. All the best.